And we are now live.
Sweet.
Oh shit,
So,
I'm on the wrong screen. Okay. All set to get started then.
all
Oof.
right. Episode 30.
Yeah,
The
here
big
we
30
are.
F.
So, on today's episode, we're starting out with covering the Iron Giant movie today, as we talked about in our last episode.
Yes, and I'm very glad you made me rewatch it.
Yeah,
Because honestly, I didn't remember it at all. But yeah, it was a good time. It was a great movie. Definitely a cult classic.
I don't. A lot of people, I do not think, understand how much like a cult classic this film is, and how much it's contributed to like animation as a whole, and or pop culture as a whole. In fact.
Yeah, well, it's definitely like the deepest movie, like kids movie I've ever seen.
Mhm.
Um, it's it's actually pretty. It's kind of a Christian movie. Or maybe that was kind of normal back in the 90s. It was late 90s, but the 90s,
What do you
where
mean?
like characters would just be Christian.
This was in the 50s.
The Iron Giant was?
Yeah, this movie takes place in 1957.
No, it was made, right?
Oh, yeah.
It was made in 99.
Oh,
Or
yeah,
it
this
was
movie was
released in
made.
99.
Yeah, this movie was made in 1999.
Yeah,
Yep.
well that's what I'm saying. I'm saying very like rarely when you watch a movie, especially a kids movie, are the characters like they say grace.
Mhm.
Maybe I'm wrong, but even for the 90s, it is kind of like a strange thing.
Was it for the 50s? But the thing that,
But
oh,
the movie was made in the 90s.
yeah, but,
I'm not saying it was weird for people to say grace in the
well, they would display that, though,
well, I don't
regardless
think
of
people
what the point.
I don't think people would display it even if the movies did take place. I don't think that happens.
I think it
Like
was less,
that's what I'm telling you.
the scene that you're talking about, I think it has less to do with them saying grace and more to do with them making a joke in the moment.
Because they also talk about the Iron Giant having a soul, and the thing that his mother teaches him about death
Yeah, but the
is
idea of
kind
a
of like,
soul is not exclusive to Christianity.
yeah, but it's a metaphysical truth that he's saying, and it's a message that this movie is promoting that,
A
listen, you
lot
may
of
not be. It's
it's not.
saying you're more than skin deep.
Yeah, and that's just a good message. Like a lot of people believe that we have souls and yet aren't necessarily religious. To say this is like a religious movie because there was one prayer scene and they talked about having a soul
That's
at
not
one
what I mean
point.
by a Christian movie, though. I don't mean it's a. I don't mean like you. I don't mean like what you're
Passion of the
thinking of, like a
Christ.
pure.
Next week we're
Yeah,
doing that.
I've never seen Passion of the Christ.
it's it's a hard movie to watch.
Is it? I heard they get really brutal with the torture.
They do. They get very historically accurate with the torture.
Yeah, well, that's kind of part. Although that I kind of dislike that because the okay, we're getting off topic, but the reason I dislike
Yes.
that is because I actually think that the physical torture isn't necessarily the worst part of that story. It's the fact that the Christ story is that in the cut in like the day, or I don't know how long it is between his betrayal and his being crucified, but in that
Not
time
short.
period, everyone is it how long
It
is it?
was a very short period of time. I think it was.
All of a
I don't know.
sudden, everyone is turning their back on Jesus, and
Yeah,
I think that's more tragic than the torture, because Judas straight betrays him, but Peter like denies him,
yep,
and the government Pilate washes his hands of it, even though he knows Jesus doesn't deserve this. He
yes.
turns his back. The Jewish people choose to free the other guy instead of Jesus.
Hmm.
So I think that people being like he was brutally died, I don't think that's necessary because a lot of people were that.
That was just an awful story in general.
Yeah, well, it's somewhat like the most tragic thing that can happen to someone.
Hmm.
Who gets the best person who has the worst thing happen to them. Okay,
Hmm.
but we're off topic. The Iron Giant. Well, are we that off topic? The
Yeah.
Iron Giant is kind of a Christ figure.
No.
Okay. Okay.
No.
I
I wouldn't say he is.
You don't think
He's
so?
more of like it's more of a coming of age story than a Christ figure. Like
Who's
when
coming of
when I
age?
think
Is the Iron Giant the one coming of age?
yeah, and Hogarth too.
Is Hogarth really coming of age though?
Not as much, but the some of the topics that he has to explain and come to terms with when interacting with the giant, I would say yes.
Well, this movie is definitely an anti-government movie at the very least, and I
Oh
love
yeah.
that.
Oh yeah, this is a very anti-war, anti-gun, anti-violence, anti-government film.
This kid is practicing his Second Amendment right with the Iron Giant, is what's happening essentially, and then and the government is trying to grab his gun.
Oh, so to start off, one of my favorite parts about this film is the animation style that it's taken on. This film is coming from a time where like Disney musicals was like running theaters, like the old Disney cartoons, and like Warner Brothers just dropped this movie. This movie is pretty dark. Like it's a darker comment or not. It's a pretty dark um movie just all in general, and the themes it tackles and the messages that it tells. And props to them for telling it and handling it. Like it's just a beautiful animation style, and I love it. I don't know if you have anything to add to that about
About the
generally
animation?
about the animation or like anything that you liked about it or before
Well,
we get.
first of all, the Iron Giant's eyes are very expressive. Is one thing that really stood out to me. Even though he doesn't his pupil what would be his pupils are like a slightly brighter spot in his eyes,
Mhm.
but he doesn't have human eyes, and yet they show a full range of human emotions, and I was very impressed with that specifically.
Oh yeah, they nailed it with this film. Just
Um, and I will say that if I'm thinking about cartoons with a very cartoony style,
mhm.
and this is very like stylized. Everything about it is it's this was just before we sort of got the modern cartoon style that I think Pixar popularized. Because
Yeah,
I think almost everything's trying to be Pixar at this point, right? But
or live action Disney or MCU.
well, I mean, every cartoon is like sort of copying Pixar, and Pixar has great animations, but but they're Pixar stylized, right?
Mhm.
And I really appreciated like this just before Pixar took over. Because when do you think Pixar got huge? Because they're not like a really old company.
2000, like around the year 2000,
Yeah,
like
so
or
this was
yeah,
just about then.
because I
So
think
I think
Cars and Toy Story both released. Toy Story released in like what 98, 99. Cars, the first car was released in like 2002. Like so, it was around that time that they got really big. Are you there?
yes, yeah. Well, that's what I was saying is that. Sorry, I'm trying to collect my thoughts. That
Okay.
that it is a really refreshing style, and it is a very 90s style. And I think I put this message whenever something gets really popular, that it kind of ruins the medium that it's in.
Hmm. This
Like
doesn't have its own medium.
well, it's the kids cartoon, right? But it's the late kids cartoon, so it's not like it's sort of like the 10-year-old cartoon, I would say.
Mhm.
So I think that's And the example I gave to you was Skyrim. I said I thought Skyrim ruined games. Not because I
Agreed.
think Skyrim's bad, but because I think every game tries to be Skyrim nowadays.
Yes.
And I think Elden Ring was a good step away from that, but it still had some of those problems, honestly.
I don't think
But
many companies are trying to still copy Skyrim. That was
no,
more.
no, because I think that the Horizon series is copying Skyrim though. I mean, it's not quite as much, but I think the open world RPG. Well, I think
the,
gaming
the
has
ubiquitousness that follows success.
yes, and I
That
think the same thing about. There's a lot of things that like that, and I think maybe there's something about maybe it was Pixar that sort of ruined the 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 uh, the pre the around puberty age cartoons.
I would say that got ruined when Disney purchased Pixar.
Well, no, but you're saying that Pixar movies got bad when Disney purchased them. I'm saying that Pixar got so popular that every company that wasn't Pixar had to try to be Pixar.
No, because Disney's always been themselves. The problem is everything else is being Disney, including
Wait,
Pixar even tried to be Disney. Pixar was at their best when they weren't Disney. The Iron Giant is probably one of the best animation films, or Spirited Away, or other cult classic
Spirited. Well, first of all, Spirited
animation.
Away is an anime, right? That's
It's
you,
animation.
you,
It's animation.
yeah, but it's anime, and you have to admit that anime has its own sort of vibe
They
going.
they are all so successful because they were their own thing.
But what I'm saying is that Pixar was so successful, and Pixar was so successful that things that aren't Pixar try to be Pixar. That's what I'm saying. And I think
Okay.
the issue is Pixar can be Pixar and they do a great job, but Pixar tries to be Disney and they get worse, and then everything else tries to be Pixar and they get worse. So nothing can be anything but what it is.
Okay. I think we're just going in circles on that debate, but okay.
Well, I don't think we disagree. I think we're talking past each
We
other.
just disagree on who copied who.
Well, no, I think we agree. I think you just think that Pixar copying Disney
Mhm.
was worse for animation than everything else copying Pixar.
Okay.
Because we both agree that Disney's the top dog of animation and that Pixar as a subsidiary was ruined by them.
Yes. Okay. Let's just get on with the movie.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Um, the opening scene, by the way, with the sort of Call of Cthulhu esque monster from the space
That's on
beginning.
with Sputnik. Oh
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
when he's in the boat, I sorry, I
Oh,
referenced Call
you're
of
jumping
Cthulhu
ahead
there.
of me. You're jumping ahead of me even. I
Oh,
wanted
am
to
I?
talk about
I was talking
Sputnik.
about okay, yeah, you can continue. I'll talk about it.
Okay, so you know the opening credit with Sputnik beeping around. Like, I think that is actually just the perfect opening for this film because of the sign of what Sputnik was and like how it's aged and is so recognizable, but yet the message that it sent to the people at the time. Like it
Was Sputnik
is
really recognizable in '99?
no, this film takes place in 1957, which
Yeah, but it
is
was
the
released
time of
so
Sputnik, and this is representing basically the height of the Cold War.
yeah, yeah.
Like
Okay,
it
we need
felt
to because
all
we keep
right.
doing this thing where you go it's the '50s and I go it's the '90s. Whenever we need to talk about the '90s. We need to talk about viewership, and when we talk about the '50s, we need to talk about like characters.
Okay, because
Well,
this
in
movie
movie.
is fully taking place in 1957. That is, I haven't strayed from that in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is whenever I mention that it was released in the '90s, you say, but it takes place in the '50s, and I'm saying that it
Why are we talking
when
about the
when
90s and 57 when then when we're talking about the Sputnik in the
Jay
opening scene?
look at me and listen to what I'm saying. When you said Sputnik represents something, I immediately thought you were talking about two audiences because I think that's generally what we mean.
It
But
does.
when you say that, you mean to the characters. in the movies, Sputnik
No,
represents
mm,
something. Because
no.
when the guy says,
When us, the audience, see something like Sputnik that was so symbolic of the time that this movie is taking place in, being 1957 at the height of the Cold War, it puts us into a position where we can better recognize or empathize through the characters and what they are thinking in their day-to-day lives, considering how big the Cold War was on day-to-day life.
okay, I didn't get that.
That
I,
is
I,
where
maybe you have to be a '90s you maybe have to be alive in the '90s to get that. But honestly, I couldn't care less about Sputnik, and I actually think that a specific reference like that kind of
this
doesn't
is
make.
characterization. Showing Sputnik in the opening credits sets a scene for this entire movie to come and all of the characters and how they react to the world around them because Cold War was huge on the people living in that time.
Okay, what I get that. I'm not saying that that's not the thing.
Mhm.
I'm saying that I wasn't put into that mindset by Sputnik.
Okay.
I was later put into that mindset by the duck and cover. That's
Okay.
what put me in that mindset. But
Yes, I
The
also have.
Sputnik reference specifically, I think that's just setting.
Okay, yeah. I do also talk about the duck and cover later in more detail as well, so we can talk about that when we get there. Yeah. Then if you wanted to talk about, we see the Iron Giant, he kind of comes crashing through the atmosphere, lands in the ocean. If you want to talk about that a little bit,
Okay.
because I know you had a bit to say before I wanted to talk about Sputnik.
No, you can continue. I didn't have anything else to say.
Oh, about like, oh, okay. So we start out like the meteor crashes through and all that bullshit into the sea during a storm, and a fisherman crashes into the giant. And we are met with this big silhouette of the giant, where it's like kind of like a what is this? It's suspenseful of what is going on, what is this thing? And it's really good at kind of showing us what is to come or building up suspense. Kind of like almost like a throwback to the Alien movies that were the Alien movie, which was so popular at this time, of where they're only showing hints and bits and pieces of the actual alien before they um, revealed it. Which that's the feeling that I got about this movie, as we see so much tension built up in the first 15 minutes before we actually see the Iron Giant. And I thought it was really good. I really liked that touch or that creative decision. Um, the next we kind of the first our main character that we kind of follow through is a kid named Hogarth, and he lives alone with his mom, and he goes down to like his mom's diner and all that good stuff. And she one of the things that first hit me was about how she mentions money is like really tight for them, and that's why she's working these late shifts all the time. But Hogarth isn't too concerned about it. Some great characterization is he kind of just like brushes that off and is just like, hey, I want to show you my pet squirrel, which leads to a really funny diner scene. And he even goes over and meets a character named Dean. And I found it odd with the magazine or the newspaper that Dean was reading, where it talks about a Russian satellite is being seen in the sky, which is further characterization um, for the time frame and what's going on. And the fisherman next to them is saying that he was saw a Russian weapon or an alien from another planet, further pushing things even more, which was really good for the time. If you have anything to talk about for like the diner scene,
The diner scene.
yeah.
I didn't get the diner. The I don't kind of what the guy's name was Dean, right? and
Hmm.
he sort of like defends the old guy.
Yeah, he sticks up for him.
But is he? It almost felt to me like he was making fun of him, because that's exactly how I would have made fun of the same guy.
He just looks over and says like, "Hey, I saw it too." And I figured it was more of a early introduction to the type of character that Dean is, where he's constantly sticking up for other people, whether he knows them or not. Yeah, so first look at him, we first meet him. He's in a full biker getup, and he looks over and claims, "Yeah, I saw it," even though he hasn't. But it's still a character moment that shows us the kind of guy he is. It was really interesting because we know that he was sticking up for him because he looks over to Hogarth after right after they leave, and he says, "No, I didn't actually see it, kid. But who's going to stick up for these guys if we don't?"
Okay.
So yeah, he's not like bullying him at all. Do you have anything about it, or
No, no, I understood that. I don't think that's how it necessarily came across to me.
okay? And then up next was the squirrel section of when the squirrel crawls up his leg.
Where did the squirrel come from? I
That
missed
was
that.
in the box. It was in the box that he brought to show his mother.
Okay, yeah, that was the pet.
Yeah, the squirrel
Okay.
was the pet. And I don't know if there was like going to be a squirrel and nuts joke in there somewhere, but he has to unzip his pants to get it out.
Yeah. Uh, I don't know if they were intending that, but that is a good catch. That's a good joke.
Do you have anything to add to that scene, or
No, no, no. It's a fine scene. It's a fine scene about a squirrel biting a guy's nuts.
okay? Yeah, I thought it was kind of funny to see. It showed the frustration kind of the characters. Really good moment in interaction between them. Um, that is when we um, like the very expressive looks that we get from Dean as it's in his pants were really funny. But then Hogarth's mom calls home and she's like, "Hey, I got to work late." And Hogarth is watching just the cheesy 50s horror movies and all that good stuff.
I'm
I,
destroying in a Reddit debate right now. Sorry, I'm not paying attention.
I know
Yeah,
you're
he's
not.
watching movies, and he goes out to explore the.
The wreckage or the noise that he hears
Yeah, so he
outside.
lives right. He lives like right by the power plant.
Yeah,
He's like just across the tracks. Okay,
yeah.
because that night I didn't. I understood that like later on in the movie when you see it, but
Hmm.
I didn't understand that he was so close, just in the
Mm.
moment. But yeah, and so that and then it was the Iron Giant was eating the metal.
Yep.
I initially thought he was trying to charge himself.
He was gonna charge himself up.
Yeah, but and at this moment when he's eating the metal, is he still like a killing machine? or is he himself?
What do you mean? He's
Is
like,
it the electrocution that makes him like into a nice person?
no, it was the crash landing when he got his bump on his head.
Oh, he was already confused when he crash landed.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering if it was one of those two things.
One of the things I really loved is when Hogarth was in his room getting together, of where it's like he's got the Red Sox poster, the Detroit Lions poster on his wall. He gets his gun and his um, flashlight and he like tapes it to the end. Shows like resourcefulness, even though he's like a little bit scared. And on his way out, um, he takes his jacket with him, and sitting on the chair is a comic book of the Red Menace, which is
Who's
really interesting. Um, it was a popular 1950s comic book about the Soviet Union creating a giant metal robotic man.
oh, sort of like the robots in Black Ops 3.
Hmm.
In Black Ops 3 Zombies. Do you know exactly?
Yeah.
Is that what they're based off of?
Oh, I don't know.
Because the Iron Giant has a circle on his foot, and I don't know if you ever played the map Origins, but you sometimes the circle opens and you have to stand under the foot to get inside of the robot. You're not like a zombies player. You don't know what I'm talking about.
I don't know. I've never played
Okay.
COD.
Well, yeah, it's pretty nuts, but that's what I noticed.
Okay.
But yeah, so was he reading this comic?
It was in his room. It was just
Okay.
it was like, hey, this is like a background piece that got the camera focus for a quick moment of the Red
I
Man.
think if I was the animator, I would have made it so rather than watching TV, he was reading a comic. He was reading that comic in his bed when he found the robot initially.
Hmm.
By the way, can I ask you a question? Do you
Yeah,
know if the way they advertised this movie was the robot good in the in like the trailers,
probably.
or did they just show
The
it as a movie
movie trailer.
where
Yeah, he was
yeah?
good.
Because I don't know if because I feel like if they really wanted like
This movie was advertised as The Boy and His Giant.
was it
Hmm. That was
because
basically the approach they
I
took.
sort of got the feeling like it is one like trailers kind of ruin reveals. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So because but I didn't know if that was like a thing in the '90s yet, where like you see every single fight scene in the trailer, and you're like, okay, so what? But yeah, so I don't know if they were gonna be like a robot crash lands on Earth, and what happens next? Like it doesn't show you that the robot's the good guy.
Nope, it shows a whole lot in the trailer. I was
Okay,
surprised actually how much it saw
because
because
I think you could have scared the pants off some kids if that wasn't how it's done. But yeah, okay, just seeing.
okay. Yeah. So Hogarth, like, he ventures through the woods. There's a lot of like broken stuff, and he gets to the power plant, which you were talking about, and he sees like lights ahead, and he like runs up. One thing that I took note of that I really liked is with the image I have on display here. There's a rock to the left hand side of Hogarth. He like throws himself against the rock, kind of closes his eyes and swallows because he sees the light behind the rock. He cocks his gun and then looks. Like he's already so in his head about all this that's going on and what he's heard and now what he's seen. It's like the idea that this is invaders from Mars is apparently more likely fact in his head than it being the local power grid.
You know what? Can I be honest with you?
Yeah.
I kind of whenever I see lights in the eye, I always assume UFO before I assume airplane. But
Okay.
I live right next to the airport, right next to the airport, so I see them all the time.
Okay.
So like every night, I'm like, wow, those are some lights pretty close. That's probably a UFO. And then I go, oh wait, no, they're heading in the direction of the airport.
God damn it.
Oh, but one time, I'll tell you what. One time there was there was a couple like green planes flying around, or presumably planes, and
Hmm.
they were flying around for a long time, and they weren't helicopters because helicopters make a lot of noise,
Yeah.
but planes when they're landing don't.
Hmm.
And they were in the air for a long time, and I'm pretty sure those were aliens
Okay. Yeah.
because they were circling the area but not heading towards the airport.
Totally
So,
must have been aliens.
well, it was weird. Is that not weird? I mean, maybe maybe they were waiting to land. They were waiting for air traffic control to give them the okay. But it was like a weirdly long time.
I'm sure it was.
And and you know how it is when it's dark outside.
Okay. Um. Yeah. So it is in this moment where the giant is kind of finally revealed to us when he comes out of the trees behind Hogarth. Hogarth starts like sprinting away from him, being like kind of terrified. Um, but of course the giant is just doesn't even take much recognize of him and goes and eats. Eventually he first bites a supporting beam, eats that, and then he goes and grabs for one of the electric pylons and gets electrocuted and then falls into some power lines. At this moment, the camera then cuts away to Hogarth's mom coming home, and she sees the mess around the house. And the TV that's on, the snacks on the floor. I thought that was kind of funny. And she just says, "Oh, Hogarth." Like, she's not even surprised. It was like she was expecting this almost. But then she actually does show, like, actual concern. Like, she turns around yelling his name when she actually realizes that he's not home. Because she goes up to his room to inspect, see if he's alright. That's when we do cut back. Oh, I skipped ahead a bit. I'm gonna have a visual in between. So Hogarth starts running away because he sees like the giant is getting electrocuted and all that. But he's not that kind of guy. You know, he shows compassion and very often throughout the movie for a lot of things.
Yeah.
So, fuck, I lost my notes. As you see, Karen with the squirrel, he's curious, um, but he sees the grid and he can like freely run away, but instead he turns back to help voluntarily and turns off the main switch, like running right into danger. Like, dude, he almost fucking died from the wires that were falling down around him. Like, yeah, and this is a monster he doesn't even know. We see, yeah, he's scared, caring. He's a bit curious, brave, not afraid to get in trouble. And that's kind of like the character that follows Hogarth through the rest of this movie, and it's really endearing to see. Um,
Okay.
yeah.
I think I was in the bathroom during this part because I remember he that then he goes down. He loses his BB gun.
Hmm.
He and then he goes down to and his mom's really pissed at him, and
Hmm.
he's or his mom shows up to
Yeah,
get him,
there
and she's
he's
like, I can't do this anymore because he's a loner. He likes to explore junkyards,
yeah
or
he's
he likes to explore the woods alone.
um
And
the she's just done. She's like, I can't keep doing this. But Hogarth instantly goes to being like this super happy mode that he just jumps in, and every time we see him, like he can't shut up about the machine. And I find the lighting of this scene perfect. Like I have two visuals here on screen about it that kind of show this, where um she's like hugging Hogarth, and the taillights of the car are behind them. And she's like, I can't do this, as like the hair is coming down over her face. It like kind of covers it up a bit. And then Hogarth apologizes, but then he kind of shifts a little and his face moves up into the light of the beams, and then he start that is the moment that he starts talking about the giant and what he saw. And we have this back and forth between the two characters of where Hogarth is constantly stepping into the light of the carbines being fully lit up, showing like a more positive mood with this more lit frame. And every moment it cuts back to his mom, who's like telling him to stop, to just get in the car, just stop. I can't do this. And she is always enshadowed by turning away from the vehicle and the light every single time that they have that interaction. And I thought that was an amazing source or amazing usage of lighting and with the animation. It was really good and I liked it. Just further emphasis using the lighting to emphasize on the moment and what each character is going through. I don't know if that follows very much or
I get you. I get what you're saying.
yeah. Um yeah, and he just drives away, sees the Iron Giant in the distance, and that's the end of that scene. If you wanna I know you had a bit to say about the classroom.
Right. Well, the duck and cover thing is so Sputnik put you in the 50s mind. Duck and cover put me in the 50s mind. So I don't know. I mean, I think obviously you know this, but so duck and cover is what they used to. First of all, it's stupid advice. It's basically security theater.
Yeah,
You know the concept of security theater?
yeah. It's just you feel safe.
It's meant to make you feel safe, like you're prepared for a nuclear blast, but realistically, I mean, you're gonna die, right?
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
If you need to duck and cover, you're gonna die. So it's just a, and I actually don't think it works. It's like security theater doesn't even work. It actually
They
makes
go
people
over
scared.
that later in the movie in the final scene when the thing happens and like the general is saying like, "Do you really think a fallout shelter is going to save you now?"
Yeah, yeah, and his mom says, "Should we find a shelter?" And Dean says, "It literally doesn't matter."
Yeah.
Like so, yeah, like everyone knows, and some people were screaming and looking for shelter, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
The atomic holocaust was a real fear, in especially and something that was propagandized in schools greatly in the 1950s, and like
yeah,
that.
and you know what? At
Yeah,
the exact same time where Reagan was walked into the White House and his generals were like, "Okay, if you ever want to nuke someone, you press this button." Gorbachev was also being walked through it like around the same time. I mean, not, it was like the late 70s, early 80s, right?
yeah.
So and there were reports that both their reactions are almost exactly the same, and they're like, "So I'm gonna end the world because someone threatened us," and they were both like, "Never." Both Reagan and Gorbachev were like, "This is insane. I'm never gonna do this."
Yeah.
So like, even though like obviously the public didn't know this, like the people in charge were like, clearly this is too much.
Hmm.
And like after and in the 40s, at least we could somewhat pretend that it's like happening far away, right? In Japan.
Hmm.
But in those following decades, like post-war decades, like instant news just took off, right? I
Hmm.
mean,
The
cameras
moon,
were becoming more prevalent.
the moon landing publicized TV propaganda about the Cold War and anti-Russian.
Well,
Uh,
no, but what I'm saying is that, I mean, if you're a president and you decide to drop the nuke, you can't pretend that that's something that happened half the world away because the world was so connected by that point.
mhm.
Not
Okay.
like it is now, but way more connected than anything they'd seen even
Oh,
20
yeah,
years ago.
but again, like that image of like the kid ducking underneath a desk and he being the only thing left in the area was like that was very real propaganda that they showed at the time. Um, the kids though were having this conversation about the giant and what was going on in scene, and like even the kids were talking about we should bomb it, and it's like the fact that that's like the go-to for the is like again just further characterization over the time that the film takes place. They did a really good job building everything up about this film.
Yeah. And what happened directly following that scene? That scene happens right before the man in black shows up. What's his official job? He's an investigator for,
Um,
X-ray phenomena, whatever.
uh, First there's the scene of back at the diner, and then Kent Manson shows up.
Yeah, but that's literally just like romantic subplot for Dean and his mom, right?
Hmm.
And it shows that his mom is like, I know he's a bit much, and Dean is like, he's not enough.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't say those words exactly, but he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know. Did you think that scene was super significant?
Um, she does talk about Hogarth a bit, and she characterizes that Hogarth struggles to make friends in school, and and he's like more lonely. Um, this is
And you know
also
what? That the more we learn about Dean, that kind of fits him to a T, right? He's a struggling artist.
mhm. the
Actually,
boat.
he's not struggling. He owns a bunch of land in Maine, no less. So
The
he's doing
boat
fine.
too. We see addressed as Earl, like takes him outside, and he's like trying to sell Dean a tractor, and he's like, "I'm sorry, I
Oh,
can't
with the
give."
bite mark.
It's like, "Sorry, I can't give you much more for this. It's got a large bite out of it." And he's like, "That's why I'm selling it. It has a large bite taken out of it."
It's weird that the Iron Giant wouldn't finish it.
And that is
Do you
when
think?
Earl says,
Do
"I
you think
call."
it's? Do you think it's sort of like when you eat uh like if someone maybe has the Ben and Jerry's in the freezer and they're like, hey, I only ate half of this, but don't eat it. So you
Mhm.
take a spoon and you scrape off like a little bit from the top, and you're like, they won't notice.
Or as Kent Manson said,
And they're like,
out of-
but it's uneven, so you keep doing it until you take like more than you intended, and they're like, you ate my ice cream.
it's like
And that's
Kent Manson says it's like a bite from a ham sandwich was taken out of my car.
yeah,
Mansley, not Manson.
yeah. So do you think he just didn't like to taste the car? What happened?
I don't know.
Also, he didn't have teeth. He's taking bites out of things. He didn't have teeth. So he should be ripping things, but he's not. He's like biting them as if you had teeth, like in an apple,
Um,
which is kind of weird.
Earl does the boat guy. He does say, "I called the government and they're coming up today." And then the scene then immediately cuts, and we get
So Earl, the boat guy, is to blame.
yeah, Kent Mansley. He shows up. I love his character. We introduce him, and he's in a full-on uniform, smoking a pipe. He's got the longest chin ever, and he shows up. He doesn't believe at all what's going on at the power grid, or he's like, yeah, 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 whatever. Get me some evidence, and now this. But he does see the gun left behind by Hogarth that was crushed, and he's like, hug, hug, okay. And like he goes to his car. He's like, "Oh, this stupid nonsense calling me up here for nothing." He goes to set the gun down, and it realizes there's a bite taken out of his vehicle.
That's pretty great. It is like real, like
It's like at
it
that
must be
moment.
frustrating for him that like nobody, like his peers don't believe him at all, and he's like, but when he said you saw the robot eat it, he said no. He should have said yes because he might as well have, right? Like
he,
he should have been like yes.
when he sees the bite taken out of his car, his whole demeanor changes for the rest of the movie. So, which that was really, it was just so funny. He was like, "Oh my god!" And he runs out to go grab the guy working at the power station, and he comes
Do you
back.
see my car? Do you see my car?
His whole car is just gone at that point. He's like, I don't see anything. He's like, my car was just. He just has a bad case of metal eating termites.
Yeah, of course. So, and then he calls up his, or then the Iron Giant eats the car, right?
Yeah,
But right as he turns his back, he's trying to go get the foreman of the power site, and he
yeah.
calls up the government and he tells them that there's a giant robot.
He does that, I believe, when he calls him when he gets to Hogarth's house, which it does cut before then to the Iron Giant or to Hogarth. He brings out the sheet of metal and like he's like, Iron Giant, I got food for you.
And that thing's like one potato chip to the Iron Giant, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, he sets up in the woods to photograph the giant, and they end up meeting, and it's almost like a child. Like this is the scene where we get it. He recognizes Hogarth from the night before when it drops the power switch out in front of him, and it's like mimicking his moves and the noises or words that he says. But we do learn here that he has forgotten everything from the bump on his head.
But that's just a theory. We don't know that for sure.
Um, well,
Right? I mean,
no,
as far
because
as we know, as far as we know, it might have been a solar flare, right? Like all we know is that there's a bump on his head and he has memory issues. Now,
well,
to be fair, I think it's a fair assumption to make. I'm just saying.
in the movie, his bump does disappear, and he gets memories back.
Does he get memories back?
Yeah, that's when he becomes a full-on um WOD, WOMD.
Yeah, but he doesn't get his memory back. He has like programming. He's a robot.
Yeah, but he thinks, feels, can
Yeah,
like
yeah. Well, it's possible that they're robots. Like people think and feel, and they still choose to be bad people. Like it's just possible that their robots are intelligent, but also programmed.
okay. I mean, maybe that could be a possibility. I chalked it up to just memory, bed bump. He's like, you don't remember anything, do you? And he like points to the bump. And then later on, when the bump disappears and he turns around and the stuff happens later that we'll get to happens. That's how I associated it. But yeah, you are right. We're never outright told. I liked when he started going home. Um, to keep in mind, he tells the giant, "You stay, I go," which that is a line that does come in huge importance later, as you
Right.
probably know now. But Hogarth chooses to keep the giant's secret, and how he says it, people panic and start shooting when they see something that they don't understand. Which, to be fair, given the time frame that he's grown up in and how scared he probably is, being that he was born and raised in the Cold War, probably very likely. So I liked that bit too. Then we get the rail track scene, the railroad.
Oh, that's that's a good scene. I
Yeah,
like that. It
that
shows
helped.
that the Iron Giant is a perfectionist.
Yeah. Get the accident occurs, and this is also where we learn that he has the ability of self-assembly. That's about all that this scene does. Um, it does play like a little part later when of the reported train crash in an area. Yeah, because the town is like, hey, there was a train crash. And Kent Mansley goes up to inspect it, and then he's like, where can I see the nearest phone? And then they point to Hogarth's house. So that's when we get to the prayer scene that you were talking about,
Yeah.
of where Hogarth gets asked to say prayers,
Yeah,
which,
but okay, so the reason that was weird to me is that I don't know how many like large animation studios would even consider that.
yeah, I don't think Benny would.
So it hasn't even been 25 years. So that's kind of a lot. That's like around your lifetime.
Yeah,
This movie is basically like something that was so common that I don't even know if it was so common, but it was like normal that they could subvert expectations for saying grace to make a joke. To I don't think kids. Well,
under,
it's not that I don't think people say grace that much less. I just don't think movies like people that write movies do.
it's not popularized or it's not as accepted publicly.
Yeah, because I think moviegoers would say moviegoers would be like, okay, that's a normal thing, and movie makers would be like, it's weird.
With that does lead to like the really funny scene just where he's trying to sneak the hand of the giant through the house to get it back outside. Somehow it got in. I loved it. My favorite part of that scene was of when we show again his like kind of his ingenuity when he throws the penny at the whatever the hanging to like to create the distraction. He throws a penny to create a distraction so he can go past and out the front door. Then he opens up the door and Kent is just standing there. He's like, Kent Mansley here. I work for the U.S. government. Slams the door in his face. And then the mom is like, who's at the door? And he's like, he opens up again sheepishly. And Kent goes to speak. He's like, Kent Mansley, you work for the U.S. government. He gives him his hat. He's like, why don't you go be a gangster for a minute? But he just
Yeah,
wants,
so he knows he's dressed like a gangster.
definitely.
So that's kind of strange. Like he's a government employee, and he's like, well, I mean, it's not thematically strange, but it's strange that he would be aware of it.
The phone call is huge for characterizing Kent.
But you know what? Kent is one of those characters that gets
The short end.
gradually more evil and then suddenly more evil. Like, you know what I mean? Like throughout the movie, he's like he gets a little bit worse as the movie goes on, but then suddenly he's like he he like lies to the thing saying that the thing killed a kid when he had a kid, and then calls it a nuclear strike on the town.
I don't think he.
Like,
I think it was much more misjudgment at that point because he had lost his job already at that point. He had been thoroughly embarrassed and run through.
yeah, I know
But
he was freaking out, but I think that I'm just saying this is something that happens with characters that are like a little bit more grounded in the beginning, but by the climax you want to have like a proper villain. You know what I mean?
okay, yeah, fair. Because he definitely reacted to everything going on more harshly by the end. But he's definitely like the character who got the short end of the stick. And like the film knows that. And he's like, what mate war? He's like, why are you calling me this late at night? He's like, there's a giant metal man here. He ate my car. He's like, do you have any pictures or a footprint? And then he just gets hung up on. And like we see that he's very much insecure about his position, or like in and of himself, where he like turns the two googly eyes away from him that are staring at him. He takes out his anger on the phone, um, by like slamming it repeatedly when it doesn't like click in place to set it down for the first time. How he like walks out of the room with his head in shame. Just even further characterization for his mindset, because this isn't the first thing he's failed on, and the general reminded him of that in the phone call.
Right. But you know, to be fair, his job is literally to go investigate UFOs. So
Mhm.
I mean, obviously
He's
like
gonna
the
just
general's like you should have a definitive answer every time. He's like, I investigate UFOs, sir. That's sort of it's they're unordinary is like the whole thing.
Mhm. This is the scene of where Kent,
Also, it's weird that he works for the army, right?
he works for the U.S. government, but the
Yeah,
army.
but the general he's talking about is the army who he's directly reporting to.
Okay. Oh yeah, that is right.
So that is kind of strange.
This is a scene after meeting Hogarth and his mother, Mrs. Hughes, and Hogarth, and he's like, who the fuck would name their child Hogarth? It's such an odd name. And he looks down at the gun and realizes that the BB gun was Hogarth Hughes' gun. And he makes a connection. I was like, Hogarth was at the scene. That is when we get the scene of them, of Hogarth in the bathroom, which again was just more comedy and stuff. But the bit of foreshadowing that I did really like is as he's walking out, you see room for rent on the window. And he says, I'll be seeing you very soon, which they're renting a room because of the financial struggles that they are having. Hmm. Oh man. Okay. Another I love how every scene in this movie is so well used for something.
Yeah, and it's like a perfect hour and a half basically, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, an hour
It's a really
20.
reasonably length movie. Actually, my popcorn only got done after the Iron Giant died. So honestly, I think I should have started earlier. But
You should have started eating earlier.
yeah, because like partially with the way through the movie, I was like, this is a really good movie. I'm gonna go to Target and get some snacks to really enjoy this.
Hmm.
But by the time I was done cooking, I like made sausages. I was like, hot dogs are good for movies.
Hmm.
By the time I was done, the movie was like over.
Oh yeah, it's a quick one. I wish
But it
more
really
movies.
isn't that quick. It's just like reasonably length.
I wish, like, this is an example of a movie that has no filler. No scene serves no purpose. They're achieving multiple things with each scene, whether it's character moments or it's um, just more building and suspense or developing the relationships between these characters or a payoff or setting something up. Like the simple shot of room for rent on their window builds up for so much more of what is to come. And yeah, that's what makes a movie great, is have good characters and use your time well. This is the scene when Hogarth goes and brings out he goes to the barn and brings his comic book stack out to the Iron Giant in the barn. This scene was extremely important, as again to all of these characters involved. Um, we see copy of Action Comics, Mad Magazine, The Spirit, and Atama, four very popular um, comic books in that time frame, and uh, especially the contrast between Action Comics and Atomo, of where we see the beginnings of the Giant's character. The scene is huge for his character as we see the Giant and the two future versions that he sees of himself. He can either be Atomo, a giant weapon of destruction that is an embodiment of what he is, and Superman, a character who is just like him and is lost on a plane on an alien planet and wants to do good. So we see the path here of a giant of these two characters where he's almost faced with like, who am I going to be?
Well, it's not really a choice, is it? Superman is the good guy, and it's not like he's like, he's more tangentially related to the robot, or he's more he looks more like the robot, but he was like, listen, the kid was like, just because you look like the evil robot, you're Superman. You're like a good person.
And same with both of what Dean eventually tells Hogarth, who then later on tells the giant, like, you can be who you want to be. You know, nothing else defines you.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Right, and that choice that the Iron Giant from that point, he's all about being Superman, and I appreciate that.
Oh yeah.
Because I don't think Superman gets enough for, like, I actually I don't like reading about Superman or watching Superman movies, but I like him as like a pair. I like that Superman exists at in Batman. I like to watch Batman knowing that Superman exists. You know what I mean? He's like the ultimate paragon, and I appreciate that, and I don't think he gets enough respect for that.
Mhm.
He's just boring to watch.
Yeah, like when you watch the Superman movies and it's Jesus reference every 15 seconds.
Yeah, well, first of all, Superman is not a Jesus figure. I don't like when people do that. There are a
Exactly.
lot of people that are Jesus figures, but Superman isn't. He was written by two Jewish immigrants. He's he's not representative of Jesus. I mean, like Frodo clearly is, right? And Gandalf clearly is.
Hmm.
So so when people write Jesus figures, they do it on purpose. But that's not what Superman is. Making him Jesus kind of defeats the difference between both those like ideals.
Yeah, no,
Superman isn't tragic. He shouldn't be.
he's always victorious. He is a beacon of light that everyone looks to. Like
Well,
quite
and you know what I don't like when people try to subvert Superman, because Superman is the subversion of like the world. You know what I mean? Like, people are nasty, not Superman. Can you hear me? I think
yeah.
my mic cut out.
No, I heard you
Oh no,
fine.
I'm good. I'm good. Okay. And the Iron Giant fulfills the same purpose, right? People are nasty. The Iron Giant
Hmm.
is the subversion of that. So he is a Superman figure, and I think we should start using that instead of Superman figure should be a thing.
I do have to say, one thing, like I'm looking through my slides a bit, and the distinct difference in coloration between the various scenes is really cool.
And you know what I really like about these is that it's not so dark.
Mhm.
Everything nowadays is just dark on screen. And even though he's in a dark room, the image we're looking at right now, you can look you're looking at him. Every
It's
movie made nowadays is just like,
the
oh, but if you were in a dark bond, you wouldn't be able to see, so you shouldn't be able to see the movie. It's like, shut up.
it's the
Let me
light
see the character.
from its eyes.
Yeah, but that's not like, even if he was in the dark, they'd let you look at the character. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, movies nowadays, they don't know how to adjust the contrast or something because they look horrible.
Hmm.
And this is great. This is refreshing.
Um, that gets the scene where like the giant stomachs growl, and so they like go out to look for food, and we get the amazing shot of like the boy Hogarth riding in the giant's hand for the first time, which was so cool to see. That was just a cool scene to watch. It was kind of like the cement of, it's like this is the payoff for the relationship that we have been building up for the last 20 minutes. And I just thought it was a really fucking good shot. Um, I thought that the when they were hiding from Dean at the underneath the burger sign was a little bit funny. I wonder if Dean ever saw that sign and then thought back and was like, "Wait, that was the giant." The giant. Um, let's see. Um, the only thing I really wanted to hit off is like we see that the at the junkyard when they get to the junkyard to eat Dean's junkyard, unfortunately. um, Hogarth is like pretending to be hip, as he puts it. He's like, "Yeah, I'm hip." As Dean is offering him coffee, he's like, "You sure you can handle coffee?" He's like, "Yeah, I can." He's like, "You sure? It's espresso." And he's like, "I said I'm hip." And so he gets coffee and is hyperactive, which was really funny to see. I liked that. And Dean has had like enough of this kid already, but he cares about it. I don't know if you have. I don't have too much to talk about for the junkyard scene, and other than how well the coffee scene was animated inside of Dean's house.
No, I appreciated him closing the curtains, or
Yeah.
yeah, when the giant is eating outside. Did they ever name the giant?
Just giant.
Hmm.
That's all that he really got. Let's see. That is, Dean eventually finds out the giant is in his yard, and they make a, and it's like they kind of become friends. He eventually is like, fine, he can stay the night, but he stays there a bit longer. So, cut forward to the next day. Kent Mansley has rented out his family's room. Uh, Dean wakes up in the morning and remembers last night that now has an iron giant pet. And so Kent and Hogarth go out together, and Dean spends the day making art with the iron giant. Which this part of the movie was like a little bit slower. It was just kind of progressing stuff onwards as Kent does his sleuthing business and building up of Dean's relationship with the boy. Um, the next scene is like way more important though. But we do get some commentary on Kent and Hogarth in the bar or the diner together. Where Kent starts talking about war, destruction, Sputnik, um, and how like weapons of mass destruction is just going to be the inevitable future, and it's just kind of like again more of that talk. But he had already been given laxatives by Hogarth, so Hogarth is able to slip away when he goes to the restroom. Um, did you have anything to say with this about maybe like the junkyard scene and what do you call it? In like the water at the lake?
Well, you don't have to say. I have to say that well, the lake is fun because the giant jumps in. I thought he was gonna electrocute himself, but then I remember the ocean scene.
Mm-hmm.
But what I want to say is that did you know that the blue whale is the largest creature to ever have existed?
Oh,
Yeah, like in your head, don't you think there were like dinosaurs that were way bigger than that?
Maybe big, but maybe not as big as the blue whale.
Yeah, the blue whale. There's nothing has ever been bigger.
It's impressive.
I know. I just saw that. But yeah, imagine you're the blue whale and you're thinking, I'm the biggest thing ever, and then a robot lands like right in front of you, and then like a giant robot lands in front of you. It's like, holy crap, what is this thing?
It's like gives up his record right then and there.
Yeah. Well, all right. Speaking of, did you see the? We're going on a tangent, but Did you see the? Speaking of Titans, did you see the new Godzilla Kong trailer?
No,
Honestly, can I tell you is that the only problem with the previous movies is that there were people in them.
I agree.
That's every time you read a review about that movie, it's like it was great, but you like next movie just don't hire any actors. Just literally just let like no dialogue, let the animals fight.
If I remember right, the last Godzilla movie had 15 minutes of fight scene in a 2-hour movie.
The issue with that is that they calculate that weirdly. So they whenever that's like the kind of fact you'd hear on EFAP when they're like there wasn't enough fight scene. You know, well there's only 15 minutes of direct contact, but that doesn't mean that's not action happening.
Yeah, but I would want maybe half an hour of fight scene and an
So
hour of
like when Godzilla is beneath the water, like making like flipping the boats over, they
action.
wouldn't count that as a fight scene. They would wait till Godzilla climbs up on the boat. They'd
I
be
don't
like, the fight scene starts now, and you're like, well, Godzilla's been killing people.
I don't agree with your statement at all. Like,
Well, no, that's exactly what it did because
no,
there
no,
was like,
I would agree with that. Like I agree with you, and
oh,
you say that I don't.
you think that Godzilla flipping over the things is not part of the fight scene?
It is part of the fight scene, but I
Oh,
still
okay.
disagree that there was enough of it because it was only like 15 minutes.
Yeah, I agree. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, you just went off, well, that's not.
I just think the 15-minute thing that you hear all the time is like a little bit overstated.
It was a bit overstated, but like, you know what I mean.
Yes, but I maybe I'm just hoping, but based in the trailer was zero humans in this trailer.
Good.
It's just a scene of a ape that's not Godzilla who's sitting on a pile of bones, and then it zooms out to Godzilla and Kong skull, like dead skulls. So
Hell
I'm
yeah.
like, I hope that that's a sign that they're cutting back on the amount of people in this movie.
It's a 2-hour fight scene.
Well, you know what else I was thinking? You remember that? You remember the Newgrounds song, "The Ultimate Showdown"?
Yes. The
I
ultimate.
I if I'm ever like a movie producer, I'm gonna make that into a movie. Zero context to what's happening. It's just gonna start with Godzilla and Batman fighting Godzilla,
Didn't I show
and it's
you
just,
Ultimate Showdown though?
no, you didn't. I actually saw okay, maybe I shouldn't say that, but I maybe you've seen the spin-off version. It's like a parody of this song, the ultimate. Uh, there's I don't know if I should say this on YouTube, but a word for when large amount of people are engaging in relations. It begins with O.
Orgy.
Yeah. So it's just that, and it's all the same characters, and it's like it's the ultimate orgy of homosexuality rather
Oh.
than the ultimate showdown of ultimate destiny.
Mhm.
So it's literally just all these guys, and it's like, remember there's a scene where it's like Abraham Lincoln blew Batman away with a rat-a-tat-tat.
Yeah.
It literally it With that scene they literally just cut out the rat-a-tat-tat part.
So yeah,
the
because I'm
away with a rat-a-tat-tat part.
pretty
It's
sure that
it's so
was
funny.
Gabe and Kyle. I
They
definitely.
just they just they just paint bucketed all the red in that music video. All they did was paint bucketed all white, and then they called it a day. It's so funny. And did you know that about a year ago that they did a reunion? They reanimated it on YouTube.
I didn't.
and they redid it. It's actually pretty good. It's a little bit different, and it's a little bit weird to hear it different, but like the quality is better,
Okay.
and a little bit of like the fighting in the thing is better. But yeah, while a lot of those characters who are named in it are still alive, I think
Hmm.
they need to just make the movie zero context, have them fight while Chuck Norris is still alive
Hmm.
because he's old now.
With this
All right,
is
where I'm sorry,
ex-
where were we?
into probably one of the most important scenes in the movie,
The
the
deer scene.
deer scene. Yes, the deer scene. So this scene starts off, and we see the Iron Giant befriend like a little deer. He sees it, he approaches slowly and cautiously, makes a little fun with the deer. Um, this is the scene of when we see both Hogarth having to explain life and death to a childlike figure, and the Iron Giant having learning what a weapon is and seeing what life and death is. And we get hints into what he is, and he starts to recognize that of what he is. The scene does segment very well with the following like night scene underneath the sky of where Hogarth teaches the giant that while death is okay, it is a part of life. It doesn't change that killing is bad. And this is a big character moment for both of them because he's just a kid and he's having to come to grips and tackle like these heavy handed conversations with this giant. And that's got to be rough. But it was a very quick scene. It was over really quickly, but it was very important to all of these characters. As like that, it just kind of covers the entire theme of the movie. You know, what if there was a gun that knew it was a gun and didn't want to be a gun?
Right. And I mean, to be fair, he says I'm not a gun. I mean, he is a gun, but
Hmm.
he just doesn't act as a gun.
Hmm.
But yeah, good.
Okay. Hogarth then goes home for the night, and he is immediately confronted by Kent. Another beautiful light shot of like the light behind Hogarth as he's like holding up his hand to block out like the bright light, and he's like, too bright? Good. But he's seen the photos now because he found Hogarth's camera in the woods from the day before, and eventually he's like threatens Hogarth with his mom making his childhood really rough, and so Hogarth kind of just gives in. He tells him about the giant and where it is. Um, yeah, just really good scene. This scene was probably like one of the darker scenes in the movie, figuratively and literally, as we're just entirely a dark room with a little with bits of light in the middle. Like this is one of those scenes that gave me nightmares as a kid, just from how it was shot.
You know, and there is a lot of great lighting just because of in this movie because I think the lighting effects probably started with the Iron Giant's eyes,
Hmm.
and I think when they animate that first scene in the movie, they're like, well, this movie is gonna be a movie where like lighting is super important.
Hmm.
So I think they put a lot of care into that.
They even like the comet trail in the very beginning was so good. Or like when the missiles or the Iron Giant takes off as well. It's also very good animation. Um, Believe it or not, we're at a point in the movie where there's only like 30 minutes left.
Yeah.
Okay, so Hogarth gets home. He was immediately confronted. The army shows up in the morning. They take him away, but all Kent has to do. is keep Hogarth and his out of trouble for one night. Of course, though, as a middle-aged man, he's not going to be staying up much later than Hogarth is, or anywhere near like an all-nighter as a young kid is going to be able to. And he is able to slip out at night. Because Kent falls asleep, but the army is like, finally, you got something, we're going up. And that is when they show up to Dean's house. And Dean is like, oh, you're here to see the Metal Man. um, he takes the military into his warehouse and he's like talking about this work of art he's been working on and how he's already sold it to a businessman for his lobby. And then we're shown with a dressed up Iron Giant. This was pretty funny because this is the scene where Kent gets screamed at by the general and loses his job. He's like, "You wasted millions of Uncle Sam's dollars." But this is also the scene where we get to see Dean and Hogarth's mom start to kick off their relationship.
I mean, he
Because,
didn't really waste millions of dollars, did he? Because what were there 50 people, and it took them a day to get out there plus
well,
gas. Like the
no,
salary of all those soldiers was probably like $50 combined.
the general says you wasted 1 million of Uncle Sam's precious dollars.
It's not that. Maybe they weren't printing as much money back then, but that just feels like not that much money.
Mm-hmm. Because the this is like the kickstart to Dean and Hogarth's mom's relationship, where because Hogarth sees or Hogarth's mom finally sees like the guy that Dean, who Hogarth has been hanging out with, and she sees that he's like very artistic and creative, and has all these passions, including her son being one of them. So yeah, then gets chewed out. I don't know if you have anything to talk about for that. Is of course once they leave that we come to not one of, but probably the most important scene in the movie.
Where he saves the kid.
No.
Or no. That's after. Right. He points the gun at the giant and he shoots a laser.
Mm-hmm.
And D sees him the first time, and he does it again, and D saves him.
Mm-hmm. The gun scene after he puts on the Superman crest. I am Superman. Um, yeah. He reacts, tries to eliminate Hogarth. Big character moment for Dean where he's like literally putting himself between the giant and Hogarth. But like Hogarth is like, no, it's not. But moment for Dean to realize how dangerous the potential is here. Big moment for the Iron Giant because he realizes that he is a weapon, whether he likes it or not. He didn't intend to, you know, kill. But and with that, he like runs away, and Hogarth chases after the giant. But Dean follows suit shortly after he sees the boy's gun and realizes that it was acting in self-defense. Which was so Dean grabs on his motorcycle finally, and we head into the third act. So yeah, who's shooting the gun? Iron Giant fires back. Really well animated movie, more so. So before we get into the third act, do you have anything about that
About the you learn that it was in self-defense.
gun scene, or talk about the third act before we get into
Well,
it?
it is just a great, like, it Dean, he goes so fast from being like this thing's just a piece of code to being
Mhm,
like, no, he was just reacting in self-defense.
mhm.
So I think that was kind of like almost gave me whiplash by how fast he goes, but I don't really know how to fix it.
Yeah. Well, he spent all day off camera with the Iron Giant. So I think that he like it was one of those things where it's like he knew it was a dangerous weapon. He hinted before with the car scene when the car's getting thrown around. He's like, "You're pushing your luck, kid." So it's like he knows the potential of danger there, and so like seeing something like a weapon being shot is like, "Oh yeah, okay, this is it. This is the danger that I feared in the back of my mind." But then seeing evidence for it being self-defense, it's like can be like maybe my fear was misplaced. That's how I perceived it at least.
Can I ask you a philosophical question?
Yeah.
Because I'm really distracted right now. I'm sorry, but it was a great movie. But I'm it if someone says Hitler was a decent painter, would you take that as an endorsement of Nazi ideology?
No.
Okay, I was just wondering. Like
Then
you're allowed to say it's it's
those are
factually true that the worst person ever was a decent painter.
well, we don't know if he was a decent painter, do we?
Well, we do because I mean his paintings survived. Dude, that was like 100. That was like not even 100 years ago. What are you talking about?
Oh, we do have paintings of him. I haven't seen
Yeah,
them.
yeah. He was a prolific artist. He wasn't that good, but he was like better than I am. That's why I said decent.
Quick detour. Hitler's paintings. Let's admire Hitler's paintings for.
Well, I wouldn't say admire. It is kind of eerie looking at a painting they're okay landscapes, right? Most of them.
These are really good. Oh my god.
They're
Hitler's
not
painting
they're not they're
sold
not
at
the best paintings I've seen, right? But you'd be like, wow, that's way better than anything I can do.
this one was sold at auction for $440,000.
Yeah, that's because there's like a group of people who like to collect Nazi memorabilia, and I actually, if I was wealthy, I think I'd be one of those people. I'm gonna be totally honest, and it's not because I'm a Nazi. It's because it's cool to have something from the most evil regime in the world to like possess it. But yeah,
Wow.
yeah, because well, the reason I thought of that is I saw a
It's
meme,
shocking to
and
me because not because I'm like,
just
not
because
because
you
I trust it.
you didn't know.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Well, do you know who the comic Stone Toss is?
No.
Well, he's notorious because he's kind of a Nazi, or he's never said he's a Nazi, but he's clearly racist, right? But and I never saw those because everyone just says, "Oh, that guy's racist," but nobody is ever like, "Here's the proof." But I did actually see the. Eventually, I found the proof that he was racist, and he kind of is. But he makes really funny comics. And like someone made a meme, and the I'm guessing the original meme was Stone Toss deciding to make their next comic generally hilarious or the most tasteless, edgy shit imaginable.
He
And
was
and the person is like, clearly this person is evil, therefore he never makes funny comics. But
he
I think most people kind of agree.
Shh. Are you familiar
What
with Movie Bob? Are you familiar with Movie Bob?
movie Bob?
From he used to upload
Did
on
he
the
do a Such an Atom?
no, he would have
Or
been
am I thinking of a
he
different?
was covered by such an item. He was on the Escapist YouTube channel.
I know the
There
Escapist YouTube channel. I hate that YouTube channel.
there's
The
a
Escapist, the Escapist was simping so hard for The Last of Us, and it was totally undeserved.
There's a test online of was this said by a neo-Nazi or was it said by Movie Bob?
Is he like a neo-Nazi though?
He tries to claim that he is like left wing.
But he says neo-Nazi stuff.
Yeah, he once said that the Nazis
Jo-
ruined um, IQ based voting and eugenics.
the Nazis what?
He once talked about said openly that the Nazis ruined eugenics and IQ based voting.
Well, you know that eugenics is what was a left, like it started as like a progressive idea. You know, it sounds weird to think about today, but eugenics was a form of the new science of genetics, and people were like, "What if we use this new science to make people better?"
It
So it's sort of weird for us modern people to think about, like, how is that progressive? But it
probably
was like a science-based ideology in the day.
was abused.
And Hitler used it. So it is weird to think about like
United
the way
States
that works. But
was
yeah, eugenics is a bad idea. And but if Hitler never existed, I think progressives would probably still be on eugenics. Because
uh,
I think that would be a thing that people were preaching until someone actually tried it, and then people would be like, "Oh, this is like fundamentally evil."
it is just fundamentally evil.
Yeah, but I don't think people would understand that unless they had like the like I think unless they had a real world regime.
Anyway, back on the important topic at hand.
Yeah,
Jesus Christ.
yeah, oh yeah, the important topic of Jesus Christ.
The kids are in trouble. And this is like when the giant saves them by catching the fallen kids. It's like the town is like, oh my god, he saved them, and it was just really cool. Good scene. It's kind of. I think we were going on, so we can like kind of power through the rest of this. We're almost done. But like the military sees him at a distance and they start shooting at him, which is the one note that I saw throughout here was whenever he's getting shot at, especially from the front, the Iron Giant like covers his eyes to so he doesn't go into defensive mode. He's almost ashamed of himself in that way, or he doesn't want to be that way. Dean tries stopping the army and is saying like, "Hey, he's only acting defensively." So, but it's a bit late already. Like the military's already sent jets to deal with him, and the Iron Giant he falls off a cliff at some point while running, realizes that he can fly, gets into a fight with the jets, and eventually gets shot down by a missile. This is the scene where, like, when he lands, he looks at his hands and sees Hogart is missing, and then sees Hogart is laying on the ground dead like the deer. He even like touches him in the same way, which was really touching. And that is like when he begins his rampage. He's angry that Hogarth is dead. Um, but Hogarth is okay in the end. He was just knocked out and injured a bit, and Dean and the mom get him in the car, but he's like, he eventually gets out and runs out because he sees what the giant is doing on the rampage. He puts himself between um, the giant and what he's shooting at to distract them, asking him to stop. And I think this visual on screen was incredible. I don't know if you have the screen. Do you have the stream pulled up?
I do, yeah. You're asking about. Oh, well, I technically have it pulled up on a different tab. Sorry, I still had Hitler's art pulled up.
God damn it.
You know what's the battle mode looked really weird to me.
It did. But
But in order to make the because the Iron Giant is man shaped, so in order to make him intimidating, they have to sort of warp that form.
mhm.
And it sort of works with like the tendrils, But it is sort of weird that all that stuff came out of him.
I was just commenting the shot from an
I like
aesthetic standpoint.
I like that shot. I imagine myself as the Iron Giant in the scene, but I kill the kid.
Yeah. This is of when Hogarth seeing the giant on a rampage, goes to stop it and yells at him to stop. He says, "You are more than a weapon. It is bad to kill, and you don't have to. You can be who you want to be." And the giant says, "Hogarth." And he picks up the kid. He comes out of weapon mode and all that. He's like coming back, and the general's like, "Wait, he's alive?" And his mom is like, "Hogarth, yeah." It was like, and General says like the kid is okay, and he goes to radio the sub to back off, and that they need to not shoot at it. But that is when Kent grabs the radio and screams at the sub to fire the nuke. And a nuke is fired on the Iron Giant's location, which is in the town.
Yeah, it's really weird that this random general would have the authority to order for a nuke.
Yeah,
Like, you need to go through the president.
it's one of those embellished, fantasized parts of the story to make it work. It was a slight criticism of mine, but it is what it is. Almost. I don't think it detracts from like the climax of the movie in any way. I liked it because he was like the general grabs Kent and he's like, "That nuke is targeted on the giant." Kent is
And they
like,
look over.
"Yeah." And he's like, "Where's the giant?" And Kent looks over, the giant's right there, and he's like, "Wait, but what?" He's like, "Good job, soldier. You just fired a nuke on our position." And he's kind of like, "Wait, I don't want to die. I want to live." He jumps into a car to drive off before he gets immediately stopped by the Iron Giant. And Joel's like, "Make sure he stays there like a good soldier and dies." This is the moment of when Dean is like, there's no point. Like, we're dead. It's too late. But then we get the touching moment of where the giant kneels down and he says to Hogarth, and he puts out his finger to him. He's like, "You go, I stay." Or, no, wait. "You stay, I'll go." Throw it back to their first memory, and he flies up to catch and stop the nuke. And his last words are "Superman" before he takes the explosion, saving the town. And that's pretty much the end of that. It's just wrapping up. Hogarth's mom and Dean get together, and Hogarth gets sent a screw from the giant's remains that they recovered. And I think we'll stop it there because we're going on pretty long. And I know you don't have much to say and are very distracted.
Well, the ending where he sacrificed himself, he chooses to be Superman, is very it's very sad. It had me choking up, but it also was like, this is a great movie for kids. I think we should have more movies like this
Yes, absolutely.
where he's doing the good thing, and the good thing. First of all, uh, Do you know the Beatitudes? Or maybe you don't know that word, but you know what they are, right? Like the blessed are the the
Yeah.
merciful, like the Jesus things.
No.
No,
You're talking to the wrong person again with this.
you don't do a Jesus. You're not. You don't know the. Well, I don't know. I'm not asking if you know the words. I'm asking, have you ever heard someone's like depict Jesus as saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit"?
No.
No. I thought you went to like Sunday school.
You're having the wrong conversation with the wrong person. Just like talking
Okay.
about Nazis and politics. I'm not the wrong person at that conversation with.
Well, you're my podcast co-host. If I have an interesting thought, I'm going to talk to you about it. But the point I was getting at is one of them is blessed are the meek, and that is usually interpreted as weak. But what it generally means is people who have strength but choose to temper it. And I
Mhm.
think that's sort of what the Iron Giant represents, because the Iron Giant isn't incapable of doing great harm, right? I mean, the kid is incapable of doing harm, but the Iron Giant is the most powerful thing on the planet, and to he chooses to be a warrior in a garden. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And he chooses to keep his sword sheathed and tend to the flowers. And the one time that he does
I
use
think
his abilities is when he destroys a nuke, and he uses it to help people.
I think he just straight up wanted to be good. It's not that he wanted, like, he hates causing harm.
Well, think about this: if he was incapable of anything, he wouldn't have been able to save the town from a nuke.
Yeah, sure.
So what I'm saying is that it's good for kids to be like, the hero of this film is this Iron Giant,
Mm.
and uh, he's a capable being, but even though he's super powerful, he chooses not to engage in violence, and that's like a great message.
Yeah.
Like it's not like saying you shouldn't be tough. It's saying you can be tough, but you got to be peaceful and tough.
Mhm.
So I like that.
Yeah. I don't have much more to add, so we can wrap things up. So yeah, next week, your choice of topic or movie.
I want to make well, I don't know yet. What I wanted to do was I wanted to get you mad, but I don't know if you like that. So I wanted to see if I can find a clip of Ben Shapiro ragging on Everything Everywhere All at Once,
Mm.
and I wanted to hear you fuming through the mic.
As long as I doubt I would fume about it, but as
I
long
think
as
I listen. I fumed, and I think you actually liked the movie a lot more than I did.
the only issue with that is we have enough to make that not copyright.
I think so. I don't think they would copyright us.
I don't care
I
if
think
we copyright or not. We need to be able to successfully transform it.
well, we would, because every other word you'd be pausing to have something to say.
Okay.
But okay, I'll look for something else because I
Yeah.
have other ideas. Like we could react to Reddit arguments I'm in at the moment, and you can decide if I'm right or not.
Okay.
We can discuss. We can do a tier list about the flags in the union.
Hmm.
We can do like a we can just bite right off CGP Grey.
Okay. Well, we'll think of what to do.